It's exciting that we get to gather this morning. Indeed, this is a weekend that we celebrate. And I'm going to go ahead and say we celebrate the liberty that God's given us. All right? I mean, if you go back and read the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, all those things, there is the acknowledgement of God's sovereignty. And so we as the body of Christ have the best understanding of that we get to celebrate the liberty that God's given us from His throne. Not from any White House, not from any place like that, but we have liberty from the throne of God. All right? Now, I did preach a message once upon a time entitled Liberty versus License. God didn't give us license, but He did give us liberty. All right, today we're going to continue with the Toward a New Day, and I have to back up and give you a brief introduction as to how we got here. I preached through the Gospel of John all during 2019 into 2020. We got to Easter, and I began to ask what next, and God said the after party, so we started looking at the after party, which was all of the resurrection appearances of Jesus between the resurrection Sunday morning and Pentecost, and we talked about all those things and how, the body of Christ would show up and Jesus would show up, and that's what continues. Folks, as we gather together, Christ shows up in our midst, and where two or three gather, we get to gather with Him. And then I began asking myself the question, all right, now, after the after party, what's next? And by this time, this was at the end of May, remember, that, the whole lockdown, shut down, go home, stay home, don't smile at each other. Did y'all notice that's what I've noticed? If everybody's wearing a mask, you can't see who's smiling. Did y'all notice that? That's one of those things. I was at, where was I at? I was somewhere. Maybe I was at Lowe's, because I did put down some quarter round this weekend. I was at Lowe's, and I smile. I'm wearing a mask because, I'm trying to be respectful and courteous of other people and not spit on them. And so I was wearing a mask, and as I was moving around in Lowe's, I'd smile at people, and you don't get near the same response anymore with the masks on, right? And so now I smile behind my mask and go, and then they think I'm crazy. And it's okay, because that's been a statement for many years. But we are moving toward a new day. We are moving toward a new day. It's not a normal, it's not a new normal, it's a new day. God is at work in the midst of all that's going on right now. Voices are being raised. What'd I do, Cole? Okay, you're coming down front. When you work up there in the booth and you approach here, I think something's wrong. So, all right, come on down, Cole. Anyway, we hear all kind of voices, and if you watch the news, you got all kind of news. If all this stuff is going on around us, and folks, we have to decide, right? We make choices on our response. I like to differentiate between response and reaction. In our culture, I see a lot of reaction. But, if I take a tennis ball and bounce it off of that wall right there, what's going to happen? It's going to bounce back. And so in our culture, in our society, we see and hear all this stuff, and a lot of people are like tennis balls, they bounce back. When it's better for us to exercise a little wisdom and caution and respond to what's going on rather than just bouncing back. All right? So, as I was looking at this is the passage that God had led me to a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to spend a couple of weeks in Acts chapter 17, because I think that as the resurrection, the ascension, all that stuff took place, the body of Christ, the disciples, somewhere between 11 and 500. We don't really know at that point, but as we get into Acts, we start to see thousands surrendering to Christ the Messiah, and we see the body of Christ in Jerusalem growing. We see the scattering of the body of Christ under persecution. We see Paul embarking on his missionary journeys with Mark and Silas and Barnabas, and they're going out throughout the Roman Empire, sharing the gospel, the good news of Jesus, and we see that, guess what? The world at that time was in disarray. The Roman Empire had a fist iron control over things, but the people down on the regular level. All right, here you go. Y'all ready? All regular people, raise your hand. Just regular people, right? You know, the governments around the world say things, and the news says things, and people say things, and just regular people are going, okay, what do I do? What now? How do I respond, behave, act? How do I conduct myself when everything around me is unnatural? When everything around me is sort of out of order somehow? How do I behave? Well, Paul, interestingly enough, found himself in a similar situation. So by the time we get to Acts 17, we see Paul just kind of moving along. You know, he's on this missionary journey. He goes to Amphipolis and passed through. This is Acts 17 in the beginning. This is not part of the text of the passage. He goes to Apollonia and passes through. I looked at that and I thought, why did he pass through these places? Why didn't he stop, set up a nice plexiglass pulpit, and start preaching? Right? I mean, that's what you'd expect an evangelist and a preacher to do, right? No, he just passed through these two places, and then he gets to Thessalonica. Did y'all know that's not how they pronounce it over there? Back in 97, I got to go to Greece, and it's Thessaloniki. And I was like, well, okay. So, but we are at Thessalonica. All right. So, and this is what it says, that while he was in Thessalonica, he went to the Jewish synagogue. So in Thessalonica, there was a synagogue. There was a group of Jews who met together to study, understand, and have a conversation about the Scriptures, Old Testament at that point. They come together and they would talk and listen and reason together in the synagogue, right? And so Paul went 3 Saturdays. And what it says he was there for 3 Sabbaths. And in Thessalonica, many believed, because what he did was he went through Old Testament prophetic passages and proved. It says he reasoned with them. He proved to them that Christ was the Messiah based on the prophetic passages and the ministry and the work of Jesus over 3 years in his life before crucifixion and resurrection, right? But because there was a group there in Thessalonica that felt threatened by this, go ahead, here, Jewish synagogue, all right? They felt threatened by it. They started a riot in Thessalonica and basically ran Paul and his traveling companions out of town. And so because Paul is sort of this spearhead thing, this catalyst, they escape him. they run him out of town, right? And then in verse 6 it says they were in Berea. Okay? So they went to Berea. And in Berea, guess what Paul did? He went back to the synagogue. He began to reason with them. And it says that the Bereans examined the Scriptures daily. So they were intent on studying the Word. They were intent on studying God and His work, right? And so he reasoned with them, and it actually said, all right, so I want you to think a moment about the town you grew up in. I've been thinking about this lately. My mom's birthday is this coming Thursday, the 9th, right? They don't live in my hometown anymore. They live in Belton, South Carolina. That's where my sister's at too. And so my mom's birthday is this coming Thursday, right? And I'm thinking about Belton and Greenwood, where I grew up. I got friends there who watch us online and that sort of thing and all that now. And I think about my hometown. Let me ask you, would you call your hometown a noble town? No. Are you speaking of Botankus? No, I'm just kidding. All right. So here you go. Listen to what it says here. It says the people here in Berea were of more noble character than those in Thessalonica. I looked at that line and I went, ooh, you want to make somebody mad, right? The people here were of more noble character than those in Thessalonica, since they received the word with eagerness and examined the Scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Then it says, consequently, many of them believed. But the folks in Thessalonica just down the way, and the folks who raised a ruckus in Thessalonica got mad that they heard some Jews in Berea were accepting, and not just Jews, but some of the general folks in Berea were accepting the message of the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, and the folks in Thessalonica got mad about it. And after they had arrested Jason, taking him before the council, Jason had to pay a fine before they let him go home in Thessalonica. Then this crowd stirs up and goes to Berea and stirs them up in Berea against them, right? So they're trying to escape from Berea now. And in verse 14, this is what it says. Then the brothers and sisters immediately sent Paul away to go to the coast. But Silas and Timothy stayed there in Berea. Those who escorted Paul brought him as far as Athens, and after receiving instructions for Silas and Timothy to come to him as quickly as possible, they departed. So let's take a look at where Paul is right now, okay? Paul's kind of traveling. He's been through Amphipolis and Apollonia and just kind of moving along. He gets to Thessalonica. Guess what? There's a synagogue here. Let's go hang out with people like us. Now, we know Jesus, but they're still sitting around in the synagogue talking about, and so he goes to synagogue and reasons with them over 3 Sabbath days. Do you think that's all we have the account of, is that he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day? What happened Sunday through Friday? You figure the folks in Thessalonica are coming around. Paul, what was that you were saying Sunday? What was that you were teaching about Sunday? And so people are starting to hear the gospel, the good news of Jesus and forgiveness and grace and mercy, not the law, not the oppression of the law. And so people are starting to believe. People are starting to come around. And then he comes back this next Saturday and he reasons with them from the scriptures, and more people. And so somebody in Thessalonica starts to feel the threat. You ready? Of change. Wait a minute, something's going to be different here. Something's not going to be right. And so they start a riot and run Paul out of town. Paul and his friends going to Berea, and they get the same sort of welcome and response, and people are responding to the gospel. And then the folks from Thessalonica come on and run them out. Do you think Paul's had a difficult week or a difficult day? That he's encountered some hardship? That he's encountered some rejection and some threat? Do you think it would be reasonable for Paul to be a little afraid in the next town he goes to? Do you think it might be reasonable for Paul to go, ooh, I got to watch my step. I got to be careful who I talk to. I got to be a little afraid for my life? Or can I stretch this a little bit in context and say I got to be a little afraid for my health? They could kill me over this. I got to be a little afraid of who I associate with because they might think differently than I do. Do you think I might be a little afraid of doing what I normally do? Okay? You know what? I have been telling all of us as a gathering for months now. We're going to respect each other. You know what? You might not want me to hug you during physical distancing guidelines. Because guess what? If I hug you, I might hug anybody. Now, I wasn't supposed to sound like that, was it? I wasn't supposed to say that like that. You're probably sitting there thinking, oh, did he just insult me? No, I'm not insulting you. But the thing is that I really have not put a great deal of restriction on myself with regard to this. When all this stuff started back in the first week of March, I basically said about the gathering 2 things. One, we're not going to turn anybody away. So do y'all know that all through this thing, there have been people here worshiping? Not a bunch, but there have been people here for worship. Second thing was we didn't cancel worship. We had worship at all 4 gatherings. 2 of them were live, the rest of them were recorded. But it was worship. It went out over the live stream. It went out over Facebook. That's some things. We've changed some things over the last 4 months. Okay? But God did not call us to react to difficulty with fear. God did not call us to react to the circumstances of our culture and our society, afraid to be who He called us to be. We have got to be the body of Christ. You know what happens when the body of Christ lays down? The world takes over. You start to see chaos. So what was Paul's reaction? Verse 16, you ready? While Paul was waiting for them at Athens. All right, so he's been spirited out of Thessalonica. He's been spirited out of Berea. He's been taken to Athens without his closest traveling companions, because it says Silas and Timothy stayed behind. But he gave word to them, sent word to them that they needed to get to Athens as quickly as possible. And listen what it says. And this is, I want y'all to see this as sort of the pivotal passage or the pivotal verse. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed when he saw that the city was full of idols. Paul's sort of hanging out in Athens. Paul's going to the marketplace. Paul's going up and down the streets, and he's going to the city center, and he's seeing physical representations of idolatry, statues, offerings being made at statues. He's seeing this idolatry, worship of all kind of things, but even more so the acceptance of all of this idolatrous worship. People in Athens are very tolerant of everything. Athens, this once capital of the Greek Empire, this melting pot, if I can use the term, of cultures from all around the world. And what comes with that was this idolatrous worship of just any and everything. Now we know that the Greeks had a pantheon of pantheon. That's it. It was just a multiple Godhead kind of worship setting there. The Acropolis that rose high above the city of Athens had temples all over it. I mean, there was no space for anything but temples. It was just temples everywhere, right? And so the people of Athens worshiped any and everything. Folks, that's where we are today. People are worshiping any and everything. Whatever makes them feel good, whatever makes them happy, whatever brings a smile to their face. This word, these two words, deeply distressed. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed. Now, the Greek word is the source of our word, and I wrote it down because I'm not a scholar. Paroxysm. A sudden attack or violent expression of emotion. Now, I'm gonna depict these two things. Over here, here's Paul, and we're going to say he's deeply distressed. And over here, Paul's having a paroxysm. I can't believe it! Look at all this stuff going on in this town. What is happening? You people have lost your minds. Would that be a violent expression of emotion? Yeah. You see? That's the Greek word describing Paul's expression or reaction to what he's encountered. Okay, so can I just go ahead and tell you? Reactions are natural. Remember what I said in the beginning? Reactions are natural. You can have reactions to things. It's the choices you make during the reaction that define whether it's a response or not. So what do you do? What do you do in a culture where things are in chaos? What do you do in a community where there's a great deal of fear? What do you do in a setting where people are uncertain, where they don't know you? Or even worse, even if they know you, they don't know it's you because you got a mask on. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to wear a mask. I respect everybody's decisions to do. Right? I mean, I just did. Some of you know Gary Kavanaugh. Y'all keep Gary in your prayers. His brother passed away last Saturday a week ago. They tested him on Thursday before he passed away, and he was negative for coronavirus, but the virus had already taken its toll. Right? And so that's the cause of his death. His lungs quit. Okay? Guess what? That strikes fear. Right? That creates this chaotic sort of what do we do? What do we do? That in a reactionary kind of posture, that means when I run into Gary, do I hug Gary? Because Gary's brother had COVID and maybe they breathed on each other. Right? Because I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you that as you consider the circumstances under which we live, we've got to decide and choose to be who God called us to be. Okay? Not who we're told to be. Not who others are being around us, unless they're being, Jesus followers. We've got to be who God called us to be. Paul was deeply distressed. That was his reaction to idolatry. Are we deeply distressed over idolatry? No, what we do, we can be deeply distressed, but then what do we do? What do you do over your distress over idolatry? Let's see what Paul did. So, ready? So, every time I see the word so and see, I circled it on my... So, and quite honestly, because my mother, she might be watching now, but might not be, we were sort of, and my sister may not remember this, but we watched Sound of Music, so every time I see so, I think a needle, pull, and thread. Y'all know that line? Okay, me too. See, it's a childhood thing. Doesn't cause me to shake or anything, but I remember it. So Paul goes to Athens. Paul sees the idolatry. Paul has a deep personal reaction to idolatry. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with those who worshiped God. Paul never stopped being who God called Paul to be. He didn't run from them. The Jews who had run him out of Thessalonica, the Jews who came to Berea and raised up other Jews to run him out of Berea, Paul goes to Athens, and it's not far. They're walking all right there within the same kind of area. Paul goes to the synagogue with the Jews, and when those who worshiped God, he began to reason again with the people who worshiped God. He began to share the good news of the prophetic passages and God's deliverance. And I can almost imagine Paul going all the way through, because remember, Paul's a Pharisee, or was. Paul was highly educated. Paul did all of the regular Jewish practices all of his life up to the point that he met Jesus on the road to Damascus. And so Paul could sit down with a Jewish synagogue and reason with them from creation all the way through the ascension of Christ. See that? But then look what it says. As well as in the marketplace every day. All right, so when did he reason with the Jews in the synagogue? on Saturdays. Now we know what happened Sunday through Friday. Whether it was in Thessalonica or in Berea or wherever he was, he would go to synagogue, 11 o'clock probably on Saturday morning. No, I don't know. I'm just joking. Anyway, he would go to synagogue and reason with them from the Scriptures, but then he would go to the marketplace on Sunday through Friday, and he would reason with them about Jesus, about the good news. You see, Paul never stopped being who God called him to be, as well as in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. As a Christian, what does your conversation about Jesus look like, sound like? Where does it take place? See, if in a room like this is sort of the singular practice of our faith, then we're not being who God called us to be. See that? We're not doing what it is that the people of God do. We've got to be in the marketplace, folks. There is a sort of a rallying cry among Christian businessmen of marketplace evangelism. Being out there where people are, those who happen to be there. Goes on to sort of delineate this a little bit. It says, some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also debated with him. Epicureanism, fully materialistic. The accumulation of stuff. Folks, it could almost be described, America is Epicurean these days. The consumption, collection, and this stuff mentality. We worship stuff, right? We collect stuff. We pile it up. I got a barn. It's a prefab barn in my backyard. And guess what, y'all? It's full of stuff. Can I just go ahead and confess before you now? There's stuff in that barn I don't even know is there. It's still in boxes from years ago. It's just stuff. Quite honestly, and I was out there yesterday because, like I said, I was putting down molding and stuff in the house yesterday. I was out in the barn yesterday, and I thought, you know what? If this thing burned down, I wouldn't know what I lost. It's stuff. Right? Stoics, these were the reason, the rationalists. These were the ones who debated the philosophies and the rights and the wrongs and all that sort of thing. And they debated with Paul. And some of them even said, what is this ignorant show-off trying to say? This ignorant, the translation that came down for centuries over this description was babbler. What is this babbler trying to say? Now, I, though am not a scholar, have had opportunity to be around scholars. And here you go. I'm going to relate this to our community because the day is July the 5th. It's the day after July the 4th. July the 4th is the day that we celebrate our independence and freedoms and liberties and all those kind of things. I can sit down. I have a very good friend of mine, Mark Tanyas, who is a pastor up in Maryland. He went to the University of Maryland, and I asked him finally about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I said, what was it you finally graduated, got your bachelor's degree in? And he said something biochemical chemistry, some science major, right? And I sat there and I was like, man, you're a babbler. No, I didn't say that to him. He left University of Maryland, went to seminary, got his degree in his master's divinity in seminary, and he's a pastor now, and he could talk to you on a level of biochemistry, neuropsychology, something. I don't know. I don't have a clue. And I'd be sitting there going, what are you babbling about? Right? Or you guys that are in the military, if you're in the military, raise your hand, or have been, retired, all that. See, thank y'all. That's just my expression for July 4th. Just thank you. thank you, because I wrote a little devotional for yesterday's gathering in the Word that our military probably more than any other embody the verse of no greater love than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And yet our military is willing to lay down their lives for folks that aren't even their friends. They don't even know them. And so I'm just grateful. But here's what I've learned in 11 years at the gathering, or 10 and a half. I can walk up to anybody in the military and go, "Really? What do you do?" Immediately, they start babbling at me. Because I don't understand. I don't understand where they are, where they come from, how they got there, what it took for them to get from point A to point B. I don't understand. So guess what I do now? I don't ask. I say, "You here with the base?" "Yeah." "Good, welcome. Glad you're here." Right? These folks didn't understand Paul. They didn't understand where he came from, where he was going. They didn't understand the reasoning behind what he was saying. So they called him a babbler, a show-off. Others replied, "He seems to be a preacher of foreign deities." And this is why he seemed to be a preacher of foreign deities, because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. He was talking about Yeshua. He was talking about the resurrection from the dead. That's a foreign deity to the folks in Athens. That was something they had not heard of. And so he appeared to be a babbler to them. They didn't understand. So what did Paul do? Paul said, "Fine, you don't understand, I'll leave. You don't want to hear me, I'll leave. I've been run out of better towns than this before." No, he didn't say that, but I'm giving you the context of Paul and what he did. They took him and brought him to the Areopagus. And said, they, who? Epicurean, Stoic philosophers, those that he was debating with, others, more than just Epicureans and Stoics, they took him and brought him to the Areopagus. The Areopagus was this place. Now, I'm going to tell you more about this next week. The Areopagus, and said, "May we learn about this new teaching you are presenting? Because what you say sounds strange to us, and we want to know what these things mean." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners residing there spent their time, listen to this, on nothing else but telling and hearing something new. So, in a season of uncertainty, in a season of chaos, in a season of societal unrest, what's your response? I've been asked for weeks, "Well, Pastor, how do you feel about this? Well, Pastor, how do you feel about that?" My response is always the same. You know what? I'm just going to love people. I'm just going to love people. Don't really care where they come from, where they're going, where they've been. I'm just going to love people. "Pastor, what if they're hostile to you?" I'm just going to love people. I'm going to tell people why I have hope. I'm going to tell people why I'm not afraid. I'm going to tell people why. I had them ask me at the funeral Friday for Warren Kavanaugh, Gary's brother. Asked me, "Well, how are things different?" I go, "They're not that different for me." We continue to be who God called us to be. We continue living out our relationship with Jesus Christ. Don't let that change. Amphipolis, Apollonia, Thessalonica, Berea, Athens, Surf City, Sneed's Ferry, Jacksonville, Hampstead, Wilmington, Holly Ridge, Africa. I was about to go inland, but I jumped all the way to Maple Hill. Holly Ridge, Maple Hill, Pink Hill, all those hills. There's lots of hills out that way, y'all. Right? Huh? Yeah, that are flatlands if you really go farther. Be who God called you to be. Right? Go and embody the love of God that we've found in Jesus Christ. Be that in the marketplace, in the synagogues, in the McDonald's at breakfast time? You know, that's when people sit around and talk about, solve all the world's problems, right? It all starts with Jesus. If you don't know Jesus, you're lost. You've got to have a relationship with Jesus. That starts by confessing sin, repenting, asking forgiveness, and surrendering who you are to Him. We've got people, somebody turned in a contact card last week saying, I want to be baptized, I want to join the gathering. That always makes me look. Are they attenders? Are they regular visitors? This person was a first-time attender. Showed up and God laid it on. I want to be a part of what God's doing here. Folks, you do what God's calling you to do, and can I tell you something? You won't be wrong. If you don't know Jesus, you need to know Jesus. So let's pray. Father, thank you for today. Thank you that you are here. Thank you that you have met with us today. Thank you, God, that you have given us your word. You've opened it before us. You've explained it to us. Father, help us to be real, alive followers of Jesus. And God, let the world see it. God, let the world know it. And God, let us not be afraid. Let us not be scared. Let us not be cautious to the point of denying who we are in a world of idolatry. God, help us to live out our faith every day and be the salt and light you've called us to be. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.